I watched the white powder dissolve into the champagne, catching the triumphant glint in my husband's eyes. He believed he was seconds away from inheriting $17 million from my sudden death. He had no idea I had swapped that poisoned glass with his mother's drink moments ago. As she collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, his smile vanished, and my ruthless, precise revenge officially began. My name is Elena. The air in our Chicago penthouse was thick enough to suffocate, heavy with the scent of expensive perfume and the drone of self-congratulation. We were celebrating my triumph, my patent, Cell Synth, the product of a decade of sleepless nights and sacrificed moments, had just been sold to Helix Corp for a sum that was supposed to change our lives. It had, just not in the way anyone expected. From across the room, I watched my husband, Liam. He was a portrait of success, the perfect host in a custom-tailored suit, but I knew the truth. His once promising architecture firm was a hollow shell, crumbling under the weight of his hidden failures. The distance between us had started as a hairline crack and had become a canyon. While I was building an empire in the lab, he was burning one down in the dark. I felt his approach before I saw him. I was standing near a massive, gilded mirror, and I watched his reflection advance. He held 2 crystal flutes of champagne, the bubbles dancing under the chandelier light. I watched in that cold, silvered glass as his left hand, shielded from the partygoers, slipped something from his pocket, a small, clear capsule. With a practiced flick of his thumb, he opened it and let the contents, a fine white powder, disappear into the flute in his right hand. He turned to me, his real face arriving seconds after his reflection. The smile he gave me was dazzling, meant for the Helix executives watching us. It was a performance of a loving husband, proud of his brilliant wife. "To you, Elena," he said, his voice smooth as silk. He extended the glass in his right hand toward me. "The poison. Our future has never been brighter." He was preparing his speech, a grotesque theater of lies he had prepared for our investors, our friends. He turned away from me for a critical second, walking the few steps to the small podium to tap the microphone. Testing. 1, 2. He boomed. In that instant, I moved. My mother-in-law, Victoria, was standing at my elbow, as she had been all night, a permanent fixture of disapproval. She had just finished telling a guest how I lacked the proper breeding for a family like hers. She was close enough for me to smell the gin on her breath. My hand was fluid. I didn't think. I just acted. I swapped my flute, the poisoned one, with the one in her hand. It was a seamless motion, lost in the general chatter of the room. Liam's back was still turned. I leaned in toward Victoria, raising my new, safe glass in a small toast just between us. "Victoria," I said, my voice sweet and low, "you deserve to receive exactly what your son has prepared with such meticulous care." A flash of confusion crossed her face, but she mistook my words for deference. A smug smile spread across her powdered features. "It's about time." She sniffed and tilted her head back, downing the entire glass in one long, greedy swallow. Liam turned back around, his face alight with false pride. "My wife, Elena," he began his speech, "is a visionary. And as we look to the future, a future she has secured for us." He kept talking. Victoria put a hand to her chest. A small cough. I watched her. She frowned, her brows knitting together. She opened her mouth, perhaps to make another cutting remark, but only a small gasp came out. Her eyes widened. Her hand flew to her throat, her diamond necklace suddenly looking like a collar. She clawed at her neck, her face turning a dark, mottled red. The champagne flute dropped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. A few seconds later, she followed it, crashing forward onto the grand buffet table, sending shrimp and delicate pastries scattering. The room descended into chaos. A woman screamed. Someone yelled to call 911. Liam froze at the podium, his speech dying on his lips. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. But it wasn't grief. It was the primal terror of a man whose script had just been ripped to shreds. His eyes, wide and frantic, flew from his gasping, convulsing mother to me. He was looking for my symptoms. He was looking for my death. I stood perfectly still, allowing the shock and fear to register on my face, playing the part of the terrified wife. But beneath the mask, I was ice. I was a scientist observing an experiment. And as I watched my husband realize he had just murdered his own mother, I knew my work was only just beginning. The sterile, antiseptic smell of the St. Jude emergency room stung my nose, a sharp contrast to the expensive perfume that still lingered on my dress. Liam was unraveling before my eyes. He paced the length of the private waiting area, his designer shoes clicking frantically against the generic linoleum. He cornered every nurse and resident who walked past, his voice pitching too high, too desperate. He kept suggesting food poisoning or a stroke, listing everything his mother had eaten at the party, desperate to provide a natural cause for an unnatural event. He was trying to write a narrative that the doctors were already beginning to question. I sat in the hard plastic chair, hugging my arms around myself, not for warmth, but to contain the rage simmering beneath my skin. Every time Liam turned at the end of his pacing loop, his eyes darted to me. It was a subtle, terrifying inspection. He scanned my face, my hands, searching for a tremor, a bead of sweat, any sign that the poison he intended for me was finally taking effect. His confusion was palpable, radiating off him like heat. He could not understand the mathematics of the situation. He had put the capsule in my glass. He had watched me take it. So why was his mother fighting for her life inside that trauma room while his wife sat here, perfectly healthy? A doctor in blue scrubs approached us, looking grave. He did not have good news. He told us Victoria was critical. He stated clearly that this was not a stroke and certainly not food poisoning. Her symptoms indicated a potent, fast-acting neurotoxin. He mentioned that given the severity and the suspicious nature of the sudden onset, hospital protocol required them to notify the police. Liam went white. The blood drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint right there in the hallway. This was not part of his plan. He had banked on a heart attack, a tragic accident, something easily signed off on a death certificate. I stood up and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. I felt his muscles turn to stone under my touch. I looked him in the eye, keeping my expression full of innocent concern, and set my first trap. "Liam, honey," I said, my voice soft enough that only he could hear. "Do you remember when you handed the drink to Mom? Is it possible the glass was dirty, or maybe someone bumped into you?" He stared at me, his pupils dilated in fear. It was a cruel question. We both knew he had not handed her the drink. I had, but he could not say that. He could not admit to the switch without admitting he had poisoned the glass in the first place. He was trapped in his own silence. He just stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, unable to form a single word. My phone vibrated in my clutch, breaking the tension. I looked down and saw the photo of Sophia, my 14-year-old daughter. She was calling from her summer camp. A wave of cold nausea hit me deeper than any fear for myself. If Liam was willing to kill me for the inheritance, Sophia was merely an obstacle to him. She was the only other heir. I declined the call, unable to keep my voice steady enough to speak to her yet. I had to protect her. I could not let this monster anywhere near my child ever again. Liam turned away, his phone buzzing incessantly. He shielded the screen with his body, but he forgot about the reflection in the glass partition of the nurse's station. I saw the contact name at the top of the screen. The Fixer. He was typing rapidly, his thumbs blurring over the screen. He was calling for help to clean up his mess. I needed to get out of there. I needed to be in my territory, not his. I told Liam I was going home to pack an overnight bag for him and pick up some toiletries for myself. I told him he should stay close to his mother. He nodded distractedly, probably relieved to have me out of his sight so he could plot his next move without my living, breathing presence mocking his failure. I walked out of the hospital and into the cool Chicago night. I hailed a cab and gave the driver our address. As the city lights blurred past the window, I did not cry. I did not shake. The time for emotion had passed. I shifted gears. I was no longer a grieving wife or a betrayed spouse. I was a scientist. I had a hypothesis my husband tried to murder me. I had data points, the powder, the message to the fixer, the desperate look in his eyes. Now, I needed to conduct the investigation and prove the theory. I sat back, dry-eyed and dangerous. I was going home to tear his life apart, bit by digital bit. The silence in the penthouse was heavy, but for the first time that night, I did not feel the weight of fear. I felt the cold, sharp clarity of a scientist entering a lab. I walked straight to Liam's home office, a room he always kept locked, unaware that I had copied the key 3 weeks ago. I sat down at his desk, woke up his computer, and bypassed his password with ease. I had installed a keylogger on his machine last month, suspecting he was having an affair. I expected to find hotel receipts or flirty emails. Instead, I found the blueprint of my own execution. I navigated through his files with the precision of a surgeon. The first layer of deception peeled away quickly. His prestigious architecture firm, the one he bragged about at every gala, was a ghost ship. There were no clients, no blueprints, no ongoing projects. It was a complex shell company designed for one purpose: laundering money. I followed the digital paper trail and found the source of the rot. Liam was not just a bad businessman, he was a degenerate gambler. The logs showed transfers to offshore accounts linked to illegal betting syndicates. The final tally made me gasp. He owed the kind of people who do not send collection agencies. He owed the mob $5 million. I pieced together the timeline. The debt had come due 2 weeks ago. That was exactly when the negotiations with Helix Corp regarding my patent had finalized. He knew I was about to receive a payout of $17 million. I opened our legal folder. Our prenuptial agreement was ironclad regarding divorce. He would get nothing of my intellectual property. But there was a clause, a standard survivorship clause in my old will that I had foolishly neglected to update. If I died, Liam was the sole beneficiary. He did not want a divorce. He needed a funeral. I dug deeper into his browser history, and the screen seemed to darken with the malice of his searches. The timestamps coincided with our dinner conversations where he had feigned interest in my work. He had searched for odorless, colorless poisons. He had read medical journals about mimicking natural heart failure. Then I saw it. The specific search term that confirmed everything NeuroX decomposition time in the human bloodstream. He had done his homework. He chose a toxin that degraded quickly, hoping it would be undetectable by the time an autopsy was performed. But the most chilling discovery was not his competence, but his accomplice. I found a thread of encrypted messages between Liam and his mother, Victoria. I read them, feeling a nausea that had nothing to do with poison. She knew. She knew everything. She knew about the $5 million. She knew about the threats from the mob. In a message dated 3 days ago, she had written to him saying that he needed to be a man and do what was necessary. She told him that I was the only obstacle standing between their family and total ruin. She had not just condoned his plan, she had instigated it. The woman who had smiled at me across the dinner table had essentially signed my death warrant to save her own social standing. A notification popped up in his inbox. It was from the bank. The mortgage on this penthouse, the symbol of his supposed success, was 90 days past due. Foreclosure proceedings were set to begin next week. Everything was a lie. The cars, the clothes, the lifestyle. It was all built on a foundation of debt and deceit that was crumbling fast. I pulled a portable hard drive from my bag. I initiated a full backup of every document, every email, every incriminating search log. While the progress bar crawled across the screen, I also uploaded the entire cache to a secure, remote cloud server that only I could access. I was securing the evidence chain. When the download finished, I pulled the drive and slipped it into my pocket. I stood up and looked around the room. It looked different now. It wasn't just a home office anymore. It was the headquarters of a hostile entity. I realized then that I wasn't just dealing with a greedy, desperate husband. I was up against a coordinated family criminal enterprise that viewed my life as a liquid asset they were ready to cash out. I turned off the lights, leaving the room in darkness, just as they had intended to leave me. But they had failed. And now, I held the light. It was 3 a.m. when I made the call. I dialed Sarah Vance, the most ruthless divorce attorney in Chicago, knowing she would be awake. She answered on the second ring, her voice clear and sharp, devoid of sleep. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I laid out the entire situation, from the powder in the champagne to the forensic audit of Liam's computer. Sarah listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she gave me my marching orders. We were not just going to divorce him, we were going to dismantle him. By 9 o'clock the next morning, I was sitting in the office of Dr. Aris, a forensic psychiatrist with an unimpeachable reputation. I needed to preempt Liam's inevitable strategy. I knew he would try to paint me as mentally unstable to seize control of my assets through a conservatorship. I spent 2 hours undergoing a rigorous cognitive and psychological evaluation. By the time I left, I had a signed, notarized affidavit certifying that I was of sound mind, fully capable of making financial and medical decisions. It was a shield he would never see coming until he crashed right into it. While I was at the doctor's office, a team from a private security firm I had hired was already at the penthouse. They arrived in a van marked as heating and cooling repair specialists. Under the guise of fixing the ventilation system, they installed pinhole cameras and high-fidelity microphones in every room, including the bathrooms and the walk-in closets. By noon, I had a live feed of my entire home accessible from my phone. I could see everything. I could hear everything. My home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a stage, and I had just set up the lights. Sarah and I met for lunch to construct the bait. She handed me a thick folder of legal documents we had fabricated that morning. They detailed the transfer of my $17 million payout into an irrevocable offshore trust in the Cook Islands. The documents looked official, complete with embossed seals, but we had left a deliberate error in the filing dates, a loophole that a desperate man might think he could exploit. I stopped at a hardware store on the way home and bought a heavy digital safe. I installed it in the master bedroom closet, making sure it was visible but secure. Inside, I placed the fake trust documents. On top of them, I placed a leather-bound journal I had bought that morning. In it, I had forged entries dating back 2 weeks, detailing my descent into paranoia. I wrote about hearing voices, about forgetting where I put things, about suspecting the maid of stealing. It was a work of fiction designed to confirm Liam's narrative that I was losing my mind. I locked the safe, knowing the code was the only thing keeping him from the rope I wanted him to hang himself with. My final stop was the hospital. I walked into the intensive care unit, the air humming with the sound of life support machines. Victoria had been moved to a private room. She was awake. The doctor told me the neurotoxin had caused temporary paralysis of her vocal cords and limbs. She could not move. She could not speak. But her eyes were wide open, darting frantically around the room. Liam was not there. He was likely meeting with his fixers. I walked to the side of her bed. She looked at me, and I saw the terror in her gaze. She tried to make a sound, but only a dry wheeze escaped her lips. I leaned in close, brushing a stray hair from her forehead with the tenderness of a loving daughter-in-law. I lowered my voice to a whisper, right against her ear. "I know what Liam did," I said softly, "and I know you knew." Her eyes bulged. The heart monitor next to the bed began to beep erratically, the green line spiking in a chaotic rhythm. She thrashed internally, trapped in her own body, screaming in silence. I pulled back and gave her a sweet, sad smile, patting her paralyzed hand. I had planted the seed of terror. Now, I would let it grow. Liam had Victoria discharged from the hospital against medical advice. He claimed he wanted her to be comfortable in her own home, but I knew the truth. It was to save money on the ICU bills and, more importantly, to keep her under his control. He hired a cheap overnight nurse and set her up in the guest room, a silent, paralyzed witness in her own son's prison. She would lie there, her eyes wide with terror, unable to warn me, unable to scream. This new domestic arrangement provided the perfect cover for me to begin my own performance. I became weak. I stopped wearing makeup. I let my hair go unkempt. When Liam spoke to me, I would look down, my voice a small, tired whisper. I complained of crushing headaches, of the pressure from the cell synth deal being too much. I confessed that I was worried I was forgetting things. I just can't keep track of anything anymore. Liam, I murmured over a dinner he had ordered in. I feel like I'm walking through fog. I watched his eyes light up. This was his plan B. If he could not kill me outright, he would have me declared insane. His gaslighting campaign began with almost comical subtlety. My car keys, which I always left in the porcelain bowl by the door, would suddenly be in the freezer. My laptop, left on the desk, would be found under the sofa. He would deny changing the Wi-Fi password even as I stood there, locked out of the network. "You changed it yesterday, Elena. Don't you remember?" he would say, his brow furrowed with that false, practiced concern. "I'm getting really worried about you." In front of him, I would crumble. I would put my head in my hands and cry. I don't remember. I really don't remember doing that. I would let him see me panic, let him feel the surge of power. But every night, after he went to bed, I would go to my own office. I would lock the door, pour a glass of water, and download the day's footage from the pinhole cameras. I had high-definition recordings of him walking to the bowl, plucking my keys from it, and carrying them to the kitchen. I had video of him crouching by the sofa, sliding my laptop underneath it. I had a screen recording of him accessing the router settings and typing in a new password. I cataloged every file, a growing library of his madness, not mine. It was time to give him the grand prize. One afternoon, I stood in front of the new safe in our closet, knowing he was in the adjoining bathroom, listening. I muttered to myself, "God, what is it Sophia's birthday? Oh, right. 1, 0, 2, 3, 0, 8. I fumbled with the keypad, making it look like an effort of concentration. Then I opened the door, took out a file, and left it open for a few seconds before closing it again. That night, I put on a show of being exhausted. I yawned at dinner, claiming my medication was making me drowsy. I went to bed at 8:30, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the bait I had just dangled. I did not sleep. I lay in the dark, my eyes open, a pair of high-fidelity earbuds pressed into my ears, listening to the microphone in our closet. At 2:15 in the morning, I heard it, the soft creak of the closet door, the beep, beep, beep of the keypad. 1, 0, 2, 3, 0, 8. The click of the safe unlocking. I heard the rustle of paper. I heard the distinct, almost silent click of his phone's camera, again and again. He was photographing everything, the fake trust documents, the forged diary of my spiraling paranoia. A few minutes later, I heard him in the living room. I switched the audio feed. He was on the phone. "She's gone," he whispered, his voice vibrating with triumph. "I'm holding the proof in my hand. She's moving millions offshore, writing in this crazy diary that the walls are talking. She's completely insane. I've got her. Call Dr. Miles. Tell him it's time to intervene. We'll have her in an institution by the end of the week, and I'll have full power of attorney." I lay in the darkness, a cold smile spreading across my face. He thought he had me. He thought he was the cat, and I was the mouse. He had no idea he was the one trapped in the maze, and I was the one watching from above, my hand on the switch. The timeline accelerated just as Sarah and I had predicted. Liam wasted no time contacting Dr. Miles, a college friend of his whose medical license was merely a tool for his vices. Miles was not a healer. He was a hired gun with a prescription pad. Through the listening devices, I heard them plotting what they called a medical intervention. The plan was crude but effective. They intended to ambush me, sedate me, and transport me to a private facility where Miles could sign off on my incompetence without anyone asking difficult questions. But before the physical cage could be built, Liam tried to build a financial one. The morning after he raided my safe, the trap Sarah and I had set snapped shut. My phone buzzed with a silent notification. It was an alert from the honeypot server we had linked to the fake offshore trust documents. Someone was attempting to access the account using the credentials I had planted in the safe. The IP address matched Liam's laptop perfectly. He was trying to drain $17 million that did not exist. I imagined the look on his face when the screen loaded to reveal a balance of 0. He would not understand it was a decoy. He would assume I had moved the money again. His failure to secure the cash made him feral. He could not wait for the weekend intervention. He needed me pliable immediately. That afternoon, he started bringing me drinks, herbal tea for my nerves, warm milk to help me sleep. The first cup he handed me had a slight, chalky residue on the rim. I thanked him, waited for him to leave the room, and poured the liquid into a specimen jar I had hidden in my vanity drawer. The rest went into the soil of the large ficus tree in the corner. I repeated this ritual 3 times a day. I acted lethargic, slurring my words slightly, letting my eyelids droop whenever he was in the room. He watched me with a predator's satisfaction, believing his chemical leash was tightening. Then, the real world came crashing through our front door. 2 days before the planned intervention, the doorbell rang. It was not a social call. Through the camera feed on my phone, I watched Liam open the door to a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. It was Marcus, the bookie, the man holding the $5 million debt that was drowning my husband. I crept to the top of the stairs, my phone raised, recording through the banister rails. The audio from the hidden microphones was already capturing every syllable. But I wanted the visual. I wanted the fear on Liam's face. Marcus did not step inside. He filled the doorway, blocking the light. He did not shout. His voice was low, terrified and terrifyingly calm. He told Liam that time was up. He said his patience had expired yesterday. Liam looked small, shrinking into his expensive suit. He began to beg. He spoke rapidly, his hands waving in desperate, chopping motions. "Please, Marcus, you have to give me a few more days," Liam pleaded, his voice cracking. "It is happening. The plan is working. My wife, she is almost finished." I froze, my finger trembling on the record button. There it was, the admission. "She is sick," Liam continued, lying with a desperation that made him sweat. "She is going away. Once she is declared incompetent, I get control. The money will be there. I swear on my mother's life, the money will be there." Marcus stared at him for a long, silent moment. Then he leaned in, his face inches from Liam's. He whispered that if the money was not in his hand by Friday, there would not be a wife, or a mother, or a Liam left to worry about. Marcus turned and walked away. Liam slammed the door and leaned his back against it, sliding down until he hit the floor, burying his head in his hands. He was shaking. He was a trapped animal, squeezed between the mob and his own murderous ambition. Up on the landing, I stopped the recording and saved the file to the cloud. I had him. I had him promising my destruction to pay for his sins. The noose was tight, and he was standing on the trapdoor. Liam came to me in the solarium just as the sun was beginning to set, casting long, bruised shadows across the floor. He held a glossy brochure in his hand, his face arranged into a mask of pitiable concern. He sat down next to me and took my cold hand in his clammy one. He told me he had found a solution for my memory loss and my nerves. He called it a vacation. He had booked me a long-term stay at Silver Lake Sanatorium. He described it as a wellness retreat, a place of rest and recovery. I knew Silver Lake. It was a gilded cage for the inconvenient relatives of Chicago's elite, a place where wealthy men parked their wives when they wanted to seize control of the estate without the messiness of a divorce court. He spoke with a sickening sweetness, stroking my hair as he explained that Dr. Miles would be coming to the house at 8 o'clock the next morning to handle the admission paperwork personally. He said it was the only way I would ever get better. He said he was doing this because he loved me too much to watch me fade away. I looked up at him, letting tears well in my eyes and spill over my cheeks. I nodded slowly, squeezing his hand back. I told him he was right. I told him I was so tired of being confused and that I would do whatever he said. I saw the tension leave his shoulders. He exhaled, a long sigh of relief. He believed he had won. He believed the mouse was finally too weak to run. But as soon as he went downstairs to pour himself a celebratory scotch, the weeping wife vanished. I locked my bedroom door and sat at my desk. I opened the secure laptop I had hidden under the floorboards of the closet. It was time. I compiled the digital death blow. I attached the video file of him dropping the powder into the champagne. I attached the audio recordings of his conversation with his mother and his desperate plea to Marcus the bookie. I attached the logs of his attempted access to the offshore account and the toxicology report regarding Victoria that Sarah had managed to subpoena quietly. I addressed the email to Detective Harrison, a man Sarah assured me was incorruptible. I hit send. The progress bar moved across the screen, carrying my vengeance with it. I stood up and walked down the hall to Sophia's room. My daughter had returned from camp just hours ago, and I had kept her sequestered, telling her I had a migraine. I slipped inside her room. She looked up from her book, sensing the shift in my energy. I did not sugarcoat it. I told her that tomorrow morning would be loud and scary. I told her that no matter what she heard screaming, breaking glass, or police sirens, she was to keep her door locked and not come out until I personally came to get her. She looked at me with wide, intelligent eyes, the same eyes she inherited from me, and nodded. She knew something was wrong, but she trusted me to fix it. Back in my room, I sat before my vanity mirror. I did not look like a victim. I did not look like a patient. I opened a tube of lipstick, a shade of deep, blood red that I had not worn since the day I signed the Helix Corp contract. I applied it with steady precision. I fixed my hair, smoothing every strand into place. I chose a sharp, tailored suit, the kind of armor a woman wears when she goes to war. Downstairs, through the audio feed in my earpiece, I heard Liam pacing the living room floor. He was on the phone with Dr. Miles. His voice was no longer sweet. It was impatient and cruel. "Make sure you have the sedative ready before you even walk in the door," Liam said, his voice echoing in my ear. "She says she is willing to go, but you know how crazy she is. I do not want a scene. Just stick her with the needle as soon as you see her, and let us drag her out to the van." I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was not the fragile creature Liam thought he was shipping off to Silver Lake. She was the executioner. I took out the earpiece and set it on the table. I was ready for the morning. I was ready for the end. The doorbell rang at precisely 8 o'clock in the morning. I was already in the living room, waiting. I had even arranged for Victoria, silent and paralyzed in her wheelchair, to be in the corner of the room. I wanted her to have a front row seat. Liam opened the door. Dr. Miles entered, carrying a leather briefcase, his face a neutral mask of professional concern. Flanking him were two men who were decidedly not nurses. They were large, thick-necked, and wore medical-style polo shirts that did nothing to hide the bulk of their muscles. They were here for transport, not care. One of them carried a small, locked medical bag. I knew exactly what was inside. "Elena, darling," Liam said, rushing to my side, his voice thick with fake emotion. "Dr. Miles is here. We're just going to sign some papers, and then they'll take you to the retreat. It's all going to be okay." He was playing his role to the hilt, The distraught husband forced to make a terrible decision. Dr. Miles was all business. He set his briefcase on the coffee table and clicked it open, pulling out a thick sheaf of papers. "Mrs. Foster," he said, his voice flat and clinical. "These are the voluntary admission forms for Silver Lake. Standard procedure. And this," he tapped a separate, more ominous-looking document, "is the medical power of attorney and temporary asset conservatorship. It gives your husband the ability to manage your affairs while you're unwell." Liam took the document and a pen and pressed them into my hand. "Just sign here. Elena. So I can take care of everything. You just need to focus on getting better." I took the pen. I let my hand tremble, just as I had for the past week. I looked down at the paper, at the line where I was supposed to sign away my life, my freedom, and my $17 million. Liam's eyes were fixed on the pen, his greed a tangible thing in the room. I let the silence stretch. Then I stopped shaking. I set the pen down on the table. I slowly raised my head and looked directly into Liam's eyes. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a scientist who has just watched the pathogen enter the petri dish. "No," I said, my voice clear and strong, echoing in the quiet room. Liam's smile wavered. "Elena, don't be difficult. We're trying to help you. Help me, like you helped your mother." I turned my gaze to Dr. Miles. "Or like you're helping him. Doctor, for what a cut of the $5 million he owes his bookie before Friday." Liam's face went from pale to ghostly. "Dr." Miles's professional mask cracked, his eyes narrowing in genuine alarm. "She's delusional," Liam stammered, but his voice was thin. "Am I stood up, the red of my suit feeling like armor. "Am I delusional about the foreclosure notice on this penthouse, or the $5 million debt to a man named Marcus? Am I delusional about the keys you put in the freezer, or the Wi-Fi password you changed, all captured on high-definition video?" Liam was backing away, his eyes wide. "And I'm certainly not delusional." I continued, my voice dropping, "about Neuro-X, a fast-acting neurotoxin, difficult to trace, especially after a quick cremation. You were sloppy. Liam, you put it in my glass. The wrong glass. Doctor." Miles snapped his briefcase shut. He knew the con was over. "This is pointless," he said to the two orderlies. "She's hysterical. Restrain her." The two men started to move toward me. Liam pointed a shaking finger, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage and panic. "She's insane. She's lying," he shrieked, the English dissolving into a desperate foreign command I did not need to understand. "Sedate her. Stick her with the needle now." The taller orderly unzipped the medical bag and pulled out a syringe, drawing liquid from a small vial. They were going to do it right here. I calmly stepped back, my eyes never leaving Liam's. I reached down and picked up the crystal glass of water that sat on the coffee table, the one Liam had so thoughtfully brought me when I first came downstairs, the one I had not touched. I held it up. The light from the window fractured through it, a perfect, beautiful prism. The massive orderly took one heavy step toward me, the needle glinting in his hand. I did not flinch. I reared back and hurled the heavy crystal glass against the wall behind him. It shattered with a violence that sounded like a gunshot, sending shards of expensive crystal raining down onto the hardwood floor. That was the signal. Before the shards had even settled, the front door did not just open, it was practically kicked off its hinges. A roar filled the room. "Police, everybody down now." Detective Harrison led a tactical team into the foyer, their weapons drawn and leveled. The room dissolved into controlled chaos. Dr. Miles dropped his briefcase as if it were on fire and raised his hands, his face draining of all color. The two orderlies, so imposing just seconds ago, were tackled to the ground by officers who moved with the speed and weight of freight trains. I heard the distinctive metallic zip of handcuffs tightening and the heavy grunts of men realizing they were overpowered. Liam reacted with the instinct of a cornered rat. He spun around, abandoning his accomplices, and sprinted toward the French doors that led to the rear terrace. He fumbled with the latch, tearing it open, only to find 3 uniformed officers waiting for him on the other side, their arms crossed, their faces impassive. He stumbled back into the living room, trapped. The circle had closed. He looked around wildly, realizing there was no exit, no lawyer, and no doctor who could save him now. His eyes landed on me. In a heartbeat, the mask of the vicious, controlling husband vanished, replaced by the pathetic, weeping face of a coward. "Elena, baby, please," he sobbed, holding his hands out in a pleading gesture. "You have to stop them. Tell them it is a mistake. I did it for us. I did it for this family. I did it for Mom." We were going to lose everything. I looked at him, feeling absolutely nothing. I walked calmly past the officers who were securing the scene and picked up the remote control for the 85-inch television mounted above the fireplace. "For Mom," I asked, my voice cutting through his sobbing. "Let us see about that." I pressed the power button. The screen roared to life. I had already queued the video file, casting it from my phone. It was the footage I had purchased from the hotel security manager 3 days ago. It was digitally enhanced, crisp, and undeniable. On the screen, Liam stood at the party. We watched as he pulled the capsule from his pocket. We watched the white powder fall into the champagne flute. We watched the smug, self-satisfied smile on his face as he prepared to hand death to his wife. "No," Liam whispered, his knees giving way. I turned to look at Victoria. She was sitting in her wheelchair in the corner, ignored by everyone until now. Her paralysis kept her body still, but her face was a landscape of devastation. She was watching the screen, and then she looked at her son. The realization washed over her. He had not just tried to kill me. When the glasses were switched, and she fell, he had not rushed to save her. He had let her suffer. He had been willing to sacrifice her on the altar of his own greed without a second thought. A guttural, strangulated sound clawed its way out of her throat, a sound of pure heartbreak and betrayal. She looked at the son she had protected, the son she had conspired with, and saw him for what he truly was, a monster who would burn anyone to keep himself warm. Detective Harrison stepped forward, his voice booming with the authority of the law. He recited the charges against my husband, and the list was long enough to bury him. Attempted murder of Victoria Foster, conspiracy to commit capital murder of Elena Foster, wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering. Every sentence was a hammer blow, shattering the facade Liam had spent his entire adult life constructing. Dr. Miles was not spared either. He was handcuffed and charged with medical malpractice, abuse of power, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. He stammered about his reputation, about knowing people in high places, but the officers ignored him, treating him like the common criminal he was. As the officers hauled Liam toward the door, he began to struggle. He twisted his body, fighting against the metal cuffs biting into his wrists. His face was contorted, ugly with rage and desperation. He locked eyes with me, and for a moment, I saw the man I thought I had married, now consumed by the monster he had always been hiding. "You set me up, Elena," he screamed, his voice cracking. "You are the evil one. You planned this whole thing. You trapped me. You are a witch." I signaled for the officers to pause. I walked over to him slowly, the sound of my heels clicking on the hardwood floor the only noise in the room. I stopped inches from his face. I did not look angry. I did not look sad. I looked at him with the detached curiosity of a scientist examining a failed experiment. "I did not trap you. Liam," I said, my voice cold and level. "I simply handed you a rope. You are the one who chose to tie it around your own neck and jump." One of the officers patted down Liam's suit jacket. From the inside pocket, he pulled out a small, clear glass vial. It was half empty. "Well, "Look at this," the officer said, holding the evidence up to the light. "Looks like he was keeping a refill handy just in case." Liam went limp. The fight drained out of him as he realized he was caught with the murder weapon in his pocket. They dragged him out the door, his expensive shoes dragging across the floor, leaving scuff marks that I would have cleaned by morning. 6 months have passed since that day. The legal proceedings were swift. With the video evidence, the financial records, and the testimony of his own accomplices who flipped on him to save themselves, Liam did not stand a chance. He was sentenced to 25 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. He will be an old, broken man before he ever breathes free air again. Victoria met a fate that, in many ways, was worse than prison. With Liam's assets frozen and then seized to pay his massive debts, there was no money left for private care. I certainly did not volunteer to pay for the woman who watched me drink poison. She was transferred to a state-funded nursing home on the far side of the city. It is a bleak, gray place where the staff is overworked and the rooms are small. She remains partially paralyzed, unable to speak clearly, trapped in a bed, staring at a peeling ceiling, left alone with her guilt and the knowledge that her greed destroyed her only son. As for me, I am currently standing in my brand new laboratory. The air smells of ozone and fresh paint. On the wall, framed in simple black wood, hangs the patent for cell synth. I kept the $17 million, but I did not hoard it. I used a significant portion to establish a foundation dedicated to providing legal and financial resources for victims of domestic and financial abuse. I want to ensure that other women who find themselves sleeping next to a monster have the means to fight back. My daughter Sophia is safe, happy, and finally thriving without the shadow of her stepfather looming over her. I walked over to the break room counter and poured myself a cup of coffee. It was not champagne. It was not served in crystal. It was just black coffee in a ceramic mug. But as I took a sip, looking out over the city that was once my cage and is now my kingdom, I smiled. It tasted better than any vintage wine. It tasted like victory. I did not just survive. I cleansed my life. I am finally, completely free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where in the world you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment down below and let me know your city or country so we can connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, hit the like button, and press that hype button to help this story reach even more people.